This is Radio Health Journal. I'm Nancy Benson. This week, what's so bad about too much salt?
For the most part, even if you don't ever salt your food and you're eating a typical American diet, chances are you're getting too much sodium.
Salt and high blood pressure when Radio Health Journal returns.
Medicare and their list of suppliers continue to change, so if you have diabetes, it may affect where you get your testing supplies. But rest assured that your number one doctor-recommended one-touch testing supplies are always covered by Medicare Part B at your local pharmacy and select mail-order suppliers. Dr. Brian Levy, Chief Medical Officer at LifeScan, maker of one-touch products.
Some mail-order suppliers may offer a limited selection of diabetes testing supplies. They may try to switch you to a different brand, saying your current products are no longer covered. That's just not true. You are entitled to continue using the products you know and trust and that have been recommended by your healthcare professional at no additional cost.
Remember, you have a choice. Stay with the number one brand used by Medicare patients. For questions about coverage or where to get your one-touch testing supplies, call 1-844-942-2654 or visit www.onetouch.com/Medicare. Medicare Part B is not a guarantee of coverage and payment, which may be subject to coinsurance, deductible, and patient eligibility requirements.
You always hear people say, stay away from eating too much salt. But that's hard to do when our favorite foods like pizza, sandwiches, and snacks are filled with it.
For the most part, even if you don't ever salt your food and you're eating a typical American diet, chances are you're getting too much sodium.
That's Dr. Bill Farquhar, professor of kinesiology and applied physiology at the University of Delaware.
The average American consumes over 32 or 3,300 milligrams per day, and much of that comes from the highly processed foods that we eat. Most organizations recommend somewhere between 1,500 and 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. It's estimated that over 70% of the sodium we get is in processed foods. I think it's in how the foods are prepared. I mean, if you look at, pizza has a lot of sodium in it. Cold cuts have a lot of sodium in them. So a lot of the things that we routinely eat just contain a lot of sodium. Eating in restaurants, they tend to have dishes that have more sodium than if we were preparing foods at home. I think people eat out a lot. Survey after survey shows that Americans consume well over 3,300 milligrams of sodium per day.
The U.S. Food and Drug Administration recommends a maximum daily intake of 2,300 milligrams of sodium. So obviously, we have a ways to go. To help get us there, the FDA has recently set both short and long-term goals for the food industry to lower sodium content in processed and prepared foods. Dr. Karen DeSalvo, Acting Assistant Secretary for Health at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, says less salt in foods should be a good thing for most people.
The draft voluntary targets issued by the FDA today are intended to help the American public gradually reduce sodium intake to the 2,300 milligrams per day, a level recommended by leading experts and the overwhelming body of scientific evidence. This action is important because it gives every American consumer more control over their diet and their sodium intake. On average, Americans consume almost 50% more sodium than what most experts recommend.
However, Dr. Robert Califf, Commissioner of the FDA, says the gradual approach is important.
Sodium has important functions in many foods, such as taste, texture, and microbial safety, and it can't simply be removed without careful consideration of these factors. Not only is this approach more precise than a one-size-fits-all strategy, but it also recognizes the fact that different foods have different potential for sodium reduction. As a result, each category has different draft voluntary targets. The FDA has established draft voluntary reduction targets for the majority of processed, packaged, and prepared foods by dividing these foods into nearly 150 categories, from bakery products to soups. The draft voluntary targets in the categories are based on our analysis of the current range of sodium in food categories, scientific research, and discussions with industry experts. The FDA is confident that the draft short-term targets, which seek to decrease sodium intake to about 3,000 milligrams per day, are readily achievable In fact, many foods, such as top-selling pretzel products, have already made the short-term target.
Farquhar agrees. For the health of the nation, those targets are important.
I tend to think that most people link high sodium to blood pressure and blood pressure alone. That's been out there for many, many years now, that high sodium can contribute to hypertension and increased blood pressure. I think probably far fewer people realize that high sodium can also cause other problems as well, even if blood pressure does not go up. So I think not many people are informed about the adverse effects of sodium on, for example, blood vessel function. There are different ways to assess blood vessel function in people. One important aspect of that is assessing endothelial function. And endothelial cells are the cells that line the innermost layer of the blood vessels. And there's been evidence showing that high salt impairs endothelial function. And the reason that's important is that impaired endothelial function is a precursor to atherosclerosis, which is the main disease process underlying cardiovascular disease. So high salt can impair endothelial function, and over time that can contribute to cardiovascular disease, even if blood pressure stays normal.
But not everybody is the same. Farquhar says depending on who you are, you may be more or less sensitive to salt.
The responses can vary tremendously. I mean, if you look at or if you examine hypertensive adults, for example, African American hypertensives, the majority of those adults tend to be salt sensitive. That is, if they increase a lot of salt, their blood pressure will go up, or if they take salt away, blood pressure will go down. But young, healthy adults with normal blood pressure, really not many of them are salt sensitive. Probably fewer than 1 out of 4 normotensive young adults are salt sensitive. So it really varies tremendously based on the population that's studied. And on the low end, I would say 1 out of 4 is salt sensitive. That's the young normotensitives. And on the other end, older adults, hypertensive adults, African Americans, perhaps 3 out of 4 may be salt sensitive.
Most doctors would probably say that everyone should know their blood pressure. It might be that you are one of the rare people who isn't affected by salt.
It is important to note that blood pressure responses vary tremendously person to person. And in fact, that's led to this whole idea of, salt-sensitive blood pressure. That is, some people are sensitive to salt and some people are not. In terms of what are the mechanisms linking high salt to blood pressure, it's really not known precisely. For one, high salt can expand the fluid in your body, the extracellular fluid volume, and that can cause an increase in blood pressure. And that's probably one of the main reasons how high salt can increase blood pressure. But there are other ways it can cause increases in blood pressure as well. The kidneys are involved, particularly regarding fluid balance. The blood vessels may be involved in that as well, that is increasing blood pressure. The output of the heart's involved in increasing blood pressure. So I think there are a lot of organs that can contribute to increases in blood pressure when one consumes a lot of salt.
New York City now requires restaurants to label dishes with more than 2,300 milligrams of salt. The warning label looks like a salt shaker placed next to high salt menu items. Farquhar says the intention is to discourage customers from making unhealthy choices.
It's hard to say if that will change individual behavior. I think it is important, though, for people to know if they're consuming a meal that has, over 2,300 milligrams of sodium. And I don't know if on an individual basis if that will steer or nudge individuals to healthier dishes, but I hope it will.
The good news is all this doesn't mean you have to completely cut pizza out of your diet. Farquhar says just eat high-sodium foods in moderation.
I think on an individual basis, it's very difficult to get sodium down into the range of 1,500 to 2,300 milligrams per day. Clearly, you have to make an effort to do that. You can't eat pizza, but if you're eating pizza every day or cold cuts every day, your sodium intake is going to be quite high. I think you can still eat some of those items, but just in moderation. The thought there is not that one high-sodium meal permanently damages the blood vessels. The thought is if you're eating high sodium every day, and every day you have declines in endothelial function, that over time that will lead to cardiovascular disease. It's not thought that, one high sodium meal will permanently damage the blood vessels. It's just thought to be more of an accumulative type of an effect.
So the next time you think to add more salt to your meal, Farquhar says, think again. There's probably more than enough. You can find out more about all our guests on our website, radiohealthjournal.net. Our writer this week is Heather Muno. Our production director is Sean Waldron. I'm Nancy Benson.
Medical notes this week. An authoritative government agency says that for most women, an annual pelvic exam may be unnecessary. The U.S. Preventive Services Task Force questions the benefits of pelvic exams in women who have no complaints or symptoms. The task force says while there's little evidence in favor of pelvic exams, there's good evidence that exams sometimes lead to false positive results and unnecessary surgery. Experts say women should talk to their physician about their next pelvic exam, but in any case, an annual gynecological visit is still a must. It may be time to take canned foods out of your diet. A study in the journal Environmental Research shows the more canned food you consume, the more of the chemical BPA you are exposed to. BPA is found in cans and jar lids, and researchers say it's linked to many health concerns, including reproductive problems. Children are especially susceptible to hormone disruption from it. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has banned the use of BPA in many baby products. And finally, revenge may be sweet, but a study in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology shows that payback doesn't bring completely positive feelings. Surprisingly, we also feel bad when we carry out revenge. It's not that we feel guilty seeking justice. Researchers say it's because exacting revenge is a reminder of the deed that made us angry in the first place. And that's Medical Notes this week. More in a moment.
Thank you for listening to Radio Health Journal, a production of MediaTrax Communications. If you enjoyed this week's show, please leave a review on iTunes or share it with a friend. You can find more Radio Health Journal stories about health, science, and technology on iTunes, Stitcher, and at radiohealthjournal.net.